All right, Ray. Ray, you were a guard here at Brushy Mountain Prison.
I hired in as a guard May the 14th, 1964.
And how many years did you work here?
I worked as a guard for about a year and a half, and then a position of an assistant recreation director came open, and the man that got the job as recreation director asked for me to be his assistant. The warden asked me if I'd like to try it. I told him give me 2 weeks and I'd let him know, and the rest is history. The rest of my 35 years in the prison system was as a recreation director.
Oh, really? So you must have some really great stories.
I've got a lot of stories, and some of them I probably wish I didn't have, but I was part of a lot of things up here that was pretty violent.
You had a long history here. You had some infamous inmates here as well.
I tell you what, I was in the middle of a whole lot of things up here. I was really good with a weapon, and I'd been on a rifle team in the military, and about every time it hit the fan up here and the weapons were passed out, I had a weapon in my hands.
James Earl Ray was a prisoner here?
The day James Earl Ray walked in the penitentiary, he was assigned to me by Warden Stony Lane, and he called me in his office and explained that Ray was on his way. He was going to be on my crew that day, and what I want you to do is see who he buddies up with and who he runs around with, because they're going to try to leave here sooner or later. And man, was he right. He did. I watched who he buddied up with. He tried to escape through a hot water thing here, a steam line, and almost got burned up. But he was with who we thought he'd be with.
So he tried to escape?
Yes, when he was trying to escape. He tried to escape 2 or 3 times, one over the back wall. That's the time he got out. And one up the front, he got out over the top of the building and down the side of the building, but he still had a 12-foot fence to cross. He was laying in the grass with a blanket over him, trying to crawl. And a lady on Tower 2 spotted him and stopped him and was a hero for a while.
He came here how many years after he assassinated Martin Luther King?
I don't know, it's a couple of years, I guess.
Why did he come to Tennessee prison?
Well, this is maximum security here. And then these mountains here are worse than the wall. The wall is part of it. These mountains are something else. And I'll tell you something else. There's a lot of snakes around here too, copperheads and rattlesnakes. And the wall is just part of it. The mountains are the rest of it.
Did he assassinate Martin Luther King in Tennessee?
Well, they say he did. I don't know if he did or not.
I don't recall.
He was convicted of that anyway.
Yeah. You've had other prisoners that were... You had other prisoners that were interesting?
Oh, look here. We've had a lot of prisoners here that's interesting. We had one prisoner here that would shave and eat it. He'd poop and eat it. And we had a staff meeting under Stony Lane. He's the first warden that had staff meetings. Otherwise, a lot of them kept everything secret. I think they figured the more secrets they got, they didn't have to worry about somebody causing them problems. But the Stony Lane was the first warden to have staff meetings. And he announced one time about this inmate that was having a problem with. And they said, but he's going to send him tonight for a psychological examination. Well, about 2 weeks later, he had another staff meeting, and he had it on account of this same guy. And he told us all, said, we got our man back yesterday, and said they sent him back, and said there's not one thing wrong with him. Well, when it come my time to talk, I said, Mr. Lane, I've got one question I wish you could find an answer to. And he said, what's that, Ray? I said, who? And the devil examined him and said there's nothing wrong with him when he's eating poop and shaving and shaving whiskers and stuff. But whoever examined him, they just didn't want to send him. He probably needed to be in a psych ward somewhere. But we had him here, and he wasn't the only one. We had a lot of people here that's on mood medication. Now, mood medication is, sometimes they'll just be like zombies. They'll just be walking around. But if they're not on that, they're really dangerous. They're dangerous to anybody, convicts or staff around them. So we had all kind of them here.
Do you think the majority of the inmates here were a product, the reason they're here is because of their terrible childhoods or because of mental things that they maybe
Both.
inherited?
Let me tell you something. Most convicts were on something when they got in trouble. Something. Alcohol or whatever, or their mental cases. And if they're not, they need to be somewhere that they can put the mental cases, because the staff at penitentiaries aren't normally equipped to handle with the type of mental cases that you see, because you don't know anything about them, and they can flip in a second. They're healthy, they're looking good, and the next thing you know, they're trying to kill somebody. It don't make any sense, but that's why we're not equipped to handle them. We don't understand them. But there is a lot of convicts in the penitentiary. I would say most of them have some type of mental illness, some type. It may not be really bad, but and a lot of them are on medication. They take medication every day. They have a medication call. They go every day, and they watch them take it. They give them a little cup of water, and they watch them take whatever medication it is.
And drugs were a big part of the story.
Oh, look here. And some of them will take anything. They don't care what it is. They don't even care what it is. If it might be something that'll make them high, they take it.
You have some other stories of inmates that were interesting?
Well, I'm going to tell you a story that I tell. I take tours through here occasionally. I'm a member of the Economic Development Board of Morgan County, and I'm one of the people that we got this place open. And I was for it for jobs, and there's people working here now. But we had we used the dining room for a game room one night. It was raining, and they didn't want to get everybody wet going to the gym, so they brought everybody to the dining room, and they played checkers and chess and things like that.
I'd like to thank BetterHelp, who's the sponsor of today's video.
How'd that go?
Sometimes this job is just too tough for me. It just is.
What do you mean?
We go through so much. Week after week after week, there's all this one drama and another, and there's so many difficult people to deal with. I mean, thank God I have somebody to talk to that just helps me understand, helps me calm down, helps me see through all the clutter and all the craziness that I have to go through, especially with this project. And that's where BetterHelp, who's sponsoring this video, is so helpful. It's just like, you can call this guy for anywhere. You can call him from your car, from work. I can go in the office, shut the door. I can do it at home. I can do it anywhere. It's great. It's just so helpful to have somebody just to like air your all your garbage on.
It's very helpful.
And make sense of it.
Yeah. I think it's great that you're able to work that into your schedule. I know that it's changing all the time.
Yeah, no, the schedule is crazy, but with BetterHelp, you can schedule it so easily. You just like, and for people that are looking for a new therapist, you call BetterHelp and you can get referred usually within 48 hours. And if you don't like that therapist, they'll you just keep trying until you find somebody that you click with. It's a great way to operate, and find somebody that just works for you, and then it becomes like your regular thing. It's really wonderful.
It's great to have each week to reset a little bit.
It's a reset. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a reset. But BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who's trained to listen to you no matter what your area that you need help with is. And it's just great to have somebody that's unbiased, that just listens and helps you understand.
I've seen you go into your sessions feeling a little bit pent up, and when you're done with your sessions, you just have this ease about you.
I'm a different person.
You're a different person.
I'm a different
so
person.
Helpful.
Yeah, it really calms you down and just helps you, gives you peace with everything that's going on. It's really helpful.
I wish some of our subjects that you interview knew how amazing therapy.
Yeah, therapy is it's such a beautiful fix. And sometimes it works quickly, and for other problems it takes longer, but either way it works. It just takes the willingness to open up and find out what's there and figure it out. And a great therapist can help you do that. If somebody needs help, it's so easy to let BetterHelp connect you with a therapist that can help you figure out your issues. You visit betterhelp.com/Soft White Underbelly, or just choose Soft White Underbelly during sign up, and you get a discount on your first month. All right, and now back to the video.
And I'm walking around and supervising, and you don't allow horseplay because horseplay leads to bad things because somebody hits somebody a little too hard. And the people we had up here, a lot of them didn't like each other to begin with, and it caused it, you can have a killing. Well, I heard something popping, just like that, and I turned around, and the guy was stabbing another one in the back. I thought it was horseplay. It turned out it wasn't horseplay. Well, I grabbed his arm and tried to hold on to it, and the guy jumped up in my chair, and he was bleeding real bad in the back. And he jumped up and ran and was turning chairs over behind him. They run all the way around the dining room 3 different times and run over me 3 different times, and I'm trying to grab the guy with a knife and get out of the way at the same time. Well, then he hemmed the guy up over in the corner, and I could see the blade disappear into his side, and his back was pouring blood already. Well, he hit the floor and was laying on the floor kicking the guy. The guy still trying to stab him, and he was kicking him off of him. Well, I got over there, and a sergeant with a big long stick got over there, and 2 officers, and the man that had the knife just handed it to one of them. Well, they grabbed this guy, this stabbed, and he's got 9 holes, 8 in his back and 1 in his side. And I know the one in his side. I saw the blade disappear into his side, but I couldn't see what was in his back. Well, we grabbed him right quick, and the clinic was next door, and they ran him over to the clinic. And he's laying on the clinic, and 2 medics are working on him. And one of them was shining. You see these little lights, they shine in their eyes in the movies. I think they get a reaction or whatever. But one medic was shining a light in his eye, and the other medic was checking his blood pressure, and they're arguing back and forth. The one that shined the light in his eye said, "We're too late, we've lost him, he's gone. We just lost him." The other said, "No, he's not gone. I've got all kind of blood pressure." Now this went on for a minute or so, and they're arguing where he's dead or not. The guy had a glass eye. The guy had a glass eye, and they were shining that light in his glass eye. Now they ran him to Oak Ridge Hospital real quick, and he's got 9 holes in him. They took him to Oak Ridge Hospital, and what they found was the guy that made the knife took a contract to kill him before he come in the dining room for either a carton of cigarettes or a 6-pack of drinks. Life cheap at Brushy Mountain. But when he paid his knife, he didn't have time to put any kind of handle on it where his hand was hanging onto the blade. There was no handle, and what I was hearing was his hand was sliding down that piece of metal. Knives up here were not made to cut, they were made to stick sharp. And what I was hearing was his hand sliding down the blade, hitting him in the back. The knife hadn't penetrated between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch in his back in his back. The knife had went full length, the blade in his side, but it was a roll of fat. He wasn't even hurt. They put Band-Aids on him and brought him back. Can you imagine lying on a table and 2 medics working on you, and they're arguing where you're alive and you're listening to them, and you're really not even hurt, but you don't know that. I can't imagine laying there and people arguing where you're dead or not.
Where do the inmates make or get these weapons?
They will make them out of anything. They'll make them out of plastic. We got some mop buckets in here one time, and we found out they was a brace on the bottom of the mop buckets. We had a whole bunch of mop buckets, didn't have a brace on the bottom of them. They'll make them out of anything that they can sharpen, rub against it, like the concrete floor you're sitting on right now. They'll rub a piece of metal on that, and they'll make a sharp sticker. They don't have to be nice. I've seen them made, look like professional made up here, and I've seen them, they're just as raggedy and even crooked. And we've had people stuck with them up here, and the blade would bend. What they had made would bend, and that's the reason they didn't get to kill them. I've seen blades bent double, wrapped around their hand. And then what they'll do when they make a blade, they'll make a handle of any kind for it, and then they'll make a loop around the handle that they can wrap around their wrist, and they'll tie it to the wrist where if they can't use it, you can't take it away from them. Because sometimes you'd be surprised how much adrenaline a convict will have. Anybody, I'd say anybody will have when they're getting stuck, and they'll have a lot of strength. And they don't want to take the blade away from them. So they'll tie it to their wrist with a loop. And if they don't do that, they'll hand it to an officer. When they get through, they've done all they can do, and they don't want to get hurt. And sometimes the officer will have a stick, and the officer will worry about somebody sticking them. So if you don't give them the knife, then you can get hit with a stick. So they'll just hand it off. They'll say, here, you can have it now, I'm through with it. I've seen them stabbed 25 times and live, not even hurt real bad. I've seen them stabbed one time and dead. They're dead. It's just where you hit them. We had one get stuck with a meat thermometer. He attacked a man, and the man had a meat thermometer in his hand. He didn't really stab him. He just stuck his hand out to push him off. We didn't know what happened. He was lying there, dead. And everybody's trying to figure out what happened. And finally, an inmate told him what happened. He had ran into this blade, and it went straight in his heart. He had a tiny red dot right across his left breast, and he'd bled to death inside. And there was it wasn't a drop of blood on him anywhere. And if a convict hadn't have told us what happened, we would eventually have found out, but we wouldn't have found out for an hour or two anyway. But he had one tiny red dot, and he's dead, and I've seen him stabbed 25 times. There's blood, you wouldn't believe the blood in them. And they survive. It's just where you get hit.
A lot of killings you've seen here?
Pardon?
A lot of killings
Oh,
you've seen?
God, yeah, we had a lot of sticking. This was maximum security prison, and what they did, they cleaned all the prisons out in the state of Tennessee and sent us their problem people, whatever the problem, and a lot of them hated each other, and a lot of them had a load of time. And I've had them tell me, it doesn't matter how I act, I'm never getting out of here. And they're right. They are right. They're not getting out. And if they've got a doubt whatsoever, and a lot of them have told me that, if I've got to worry whether he's going to do something to me or not, I'm just going to go kill him, because I can't do 200 years. So if they give me 300, they've not affected my sentence one bit. And I've had them tell me, they'd tell the judge, well, this makes me 300 years. Why don't you just give me an extra 100, and that'll make me 400, and that's a good even number, because you can't do what you got to do. And you're not ever getting out of here. And they would tell me also, and I agreed with them, that this is not much of a life. When you got the rest of your life in here, and you know the only way you're leaving here is feet first, you're leaving in a box, this is not much to look forward to for the rest of your life. And I've had them tell me, it's the point, it doesn't matter anymore. The good thing is, most of them never attacked guards. They just didn't do it. But a lot of things, when you see the movies, and you see a new convict come in a movie and all the guards run over and beat him up, that didn't happen here either. That just did not happen here. Officers and convicts dealt with each other, tolerated each other I won't say they liked each other, because they probably didn't, but they at least tolerated each other pretty well here, and they learned to live together, and that's what we done. We wound up living together.
But it was legal or allowed that the guards would beat the prisoners?
Early on, let me tell you, but when I first got here, they used a whip a lot. They had a whip. Before I came up here, whipping was a common thing. And the way one got whipped is if an officer, what I was told by officers and inmate, if you want him whipped, you say, I want him whipped. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. My next door neighbor would wake us up at night screaming, and I asked him one time what was bothering him, and he told me that when he worked up here years ago, probably back in the 30s, that all you had to do have one whipped to say, I want him whipped. And he and other officers would bet each other on who could have the most whipped one week. And that's not right. There's nothing right about that. And they got after him at night. He'd have nightmares at night on what he'd done to people, and had them whipped. And when they whipped, the convicts told me, what you do, they'd lay you down, take your clothes off and lay you down. The first 7-foot strap, and it was a bad one. When they hit you the first lick with it, right across the rear end, it would bring a blister. The next lick would bust the blister, and the next lick from then on would bring blood. And they said a lot of times they couldn't walk for a week after they got a whipping. And they'd whip them according to what they'd done. If you tried to use a knife, that would be several licks. most of them going to be several licks. And also, they had a task. They had to get in the mines. They had to load so much coal. And if you didn't load that much coal, every night you come down here that you didn't load the coal, I was told that you got whipped. You got whipped every day that you didn't get your task. And whatever you had to do, if you didn't get it, they whipped you.
So this is coal mining country. This is coal mining country.
Yeah, oh yes.
And early on, you had the prisoners.
But if you was out on the gang anywhere else, if you didn't do what you was told to do, if an officer wanted you whipped, this is what I was told, and I don't doubt it one lick. I just don't doubt it. You get whipped every day. They want to whip you.
The prisoners would work.
Oh yeah, they work in coal mine, and a lot of people. Look here, also I was told that a lot of people died from working in the coal mine that probably didn't die from working in the coal mine. Somebody killed them, and that's what the story was told. And I believe that too. I really believe that. And I'm not a guy that just believes all these conspiracy things. But I was around some stuff up here that there was some bad stuff. And also, I learned to use some of the stuff that I saw that they talked about. I particularly like to listen to the bank robbers, because they talk about how you go in to rob a place and you scare everybody to death. If it's where you could, you fired a shot. You made everybody lay down. You fired a shot close to them, and you talk mean to them, how you gonna blow their brains out and everything. Well, I had to go to the mines one time to get one that had hung it. Hanging is when you refuse to work, and that's a whipping offense up here. That is the whipping offense. If you say I'm not working anymore, you're gonna get whipped. We had a man come in here. He wore a size 17 shoe. They couldn't work him for 2 or 3 weeks till they got shoes to fit him. He worked a little while, and they called me in the office and told me that he'd hung it and to go get him and bring him back down the hill. So I went up, but the deputy warden told me he's going to escape on you coming back. He's made his brags that he's leaving you coming down the hill. Well, we had a car that took the mining shifts to work, and it would hold 30, 40 people, and it was let down the mountain on a huge cable, electrical cable. So we went up to get him, and I told the guys with me, I said, I'm going to try something that they've been teaching me, and I'm going to see if it works. So we went up there, and the first thing I told him was, let me tell your boss that you've changed your mind, that you want to go back to work, because what's waiting you down the hill, that big strap's waiting on you, and whether you realize it or not, you've quit now, they're going to whip you, and you're going to be back up here tomorrow. You've not quit anyway, you just think you have, so let me tell your boss you've changed your mind. And he called me a honky MF and told me that he did what he wanted to do and not what somebody at the penitentiary wanted him to do. And I said, son, you're not doing what I'm telling you to do. I'm trying to keep you from getting beat to death. But you've already figured, you've told me what you're going to do, and you've told me what you think I am. Now I'm going to give you some information. If you make a move, walk down that hill, we're going to handcuff you to that car. Mr. McCabe, the one with me, is going to handcuff you to that car. And if you make one move, I've got an automatic shotgun here, and I've got buckshot in it. And each shell has got 7 .32 caliber slugs in it. And if you make one move going down the hill, I'm going to cut you in 2. So you're not leaving me. I don't know what's going to happen, but what's happened down the hill, they're going to beat you to death. But you're not leaving. So I said, Mr. McCabe, handcuffed him to that car right there. And if he moves, I'm going to kill him. He never moved a muscle. And it worked, because I didn't have to shoot him. I don't know if he was going to try to escape or not. But maybe I scared him into not trying. But in all honesty, I would have shot him, because you don't have much choice.
Did you ever have to shoot a prisoner?
No, but I had to slack out the trigger in a hostage situation. I had a .45 automatic, and he'd already been shot. And he had a fire extinguisher, and he was supposed to spray us to keep us away from whoever had the hostage. A guy named Jim Gunner, who was known as Country. And they had kept him hostage all day. And when we went up the steps, my job was to cut the sheets holding the bars, through 2 doors. And then after I cut the sheets, on the second door, when the officers went into where the hostage was, I've got to guard that door, nobody comes through the door. And this guy had a fire extinguisher, and somebody told him to throw it down. Well, the man in charge of the whole thing asked me, the last thing he asked me before we went up the steps, do you have any doubts you can pull that trigger? Well, you can't have any doubts. You just can't. I wouldn't want to shoot anybody. However, you shouldn't be up here if you can't pull it. Not where you want to or not, but you can't sit and let some guy that may have killed 7 or 8 people kill 2 or 3 other people here. So anyway, the guy that's in charge said, "What, can you pull the trigger?" I said, "I can pull the trigger if I have to." And he said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want a man on my right shoulder." And when I'm cutting the sheets, we had a fellow up here had been yelling down the stairs. He tore a table up and they had 4 clubs, 4 ball bats, 4 table legs. And also they showed the officers a pistol, what we thought was a pistol. Turned out it was a bar of soap whittled out some way like a 25 automatic and wrapped up in tinfoil. Looked like a little 25 automatic. So we thought they had a pistol and 4 clubs. And the one who'd been yelling down the stairs was capable of doing what he said he's going to kill us all. We come up the step. So I told him, I said, I want one of you to shoot Tony, because you're going to have to. Don't play, because he'll do what he says he's got to do. So we go up the steps, and that's this one guy's holding a fire extinguisher, and somebody told him to throw it down, and I think he panicked. I really don't think he was going to use it on us. We did at that time, after we had time to think about it. This guy wasn't even one of the crowd that really was a bad people. He wanted to be part of the crowd, and it almost got him killed. So he raised the fire extinguisher rather than throw it down. And somebody shot him. He got hit with a stick and kicked, and I think he's dead. I think he's laying there. He's laying right in front of me, and I've got a cock 45, and I'm standing guarding the door. Nobody coming through the door. They just ain't coming through the door. He raised up in my face, and he was within 6 inches of the pistol I had. And I told him, I said, if you move another muscle, I'm scared of your brains all over the floor. And he lay straight back down. I mean, he went down, and I'm glad he did. If I'd have shot him, I'd have probably been a semi-hero, because it's during a hostage situation. But I'm sure glad I didn't, because he didn't need shooting. And I'm glad I didn't shoot him, because the way it turned out, he was probably the least dangerous of the whole crowd. But he come really, I had to slack out there. If you've ever shot a pistol, most of them got a little creep in the trigger. I had to slack out the trigger. But it don't end right there. They got the hostage on out there, and I walked back through the cell block, and there's a bunch of inmates that hadn't cut out their, 7 cut out of their cell. But there's a bunch of them hadn't done anything. They're just sitting in their cell. They're trapped in there just like everybody else is. And this inmate that I knew from Chattanooga, we never had a problem out of him, but somebody shipped him in here as a problem. And he was on his knees praying. It's a classic praying stance. And I walked over to his cell, and he looked up at me, and Lord, he looked pitiful, and he said, "Mr. Tucker, please don't kill me." Now, if you've ever had anybody say anything and mean it like that, that's a pretty heavy thing to lay on you. And I said, "What in the world? Why would you think that I'd kill you?" He said, "Mr. Tucker, if one of these fools up here has hurt country was a hostage, if one of them's hurt him, we've already talked up here, we know you're going to kill us all. And here's the bad thing about it. Walking up those steps, that's what I was worried about, is somebody would hurt country and somebody in our crew would start shooting people in cells." Now, it didn't turn out anyway that way, but that's really what I was thinking, and that's what he was thinking too. So I told him, I said, "Get on your bunk, lay down, don't say a thing, just do what you're told to do, and you're going to be okay." And for the next, I'd say 6 months, every time I'd see him on the yard, he'd come over and shake hands with me and thank me for not killing him. I had no intention of killing him to begin with, but he really expected, and if I was in his place, I probably would have expected the same thing. Because things would get hairy up here at times, and everything happened up here was dangerous. It was involved some kind of weapons, homemade weapons.
Who would you say is the most dangerous prisoner you ever had?
Well, I tell you what, we had one up here that the deputy warden told me there wasn't a more dangerous man in the state of Tennessee. His name was John May. He's from Rhode Island. And when he got out, I think they flew him back to Rhode Island. And he worked for me. I had him working for me because I had him taking care of the weights. And my theory was he can ask somebody not to tear something up, and it's better than 2 guards standing there with automatic weapons. The guards may or may not shoot. John May would definitely cut your head off. John May captured him a small hawk. He was minimum security at that time. Later on, he captured him a small hawk, and you're not allowed to have pets, and you're definitely not allowed to keep raptors, things like that. And somebody reported it, and the game warden went over to confiscate the hawk, the young hawk. And they told John to let him have it. And John reached and got the hawk, held it with the neck, and pulled its head off. And he told me later on, they were almost certain, or they thought John had killed 7 or 8 people in robberies through his life. And John worked for me, and he was a good worker. He was a good worker, dangerous, but a good worker. And he told me of all the things he'd ever done in his life, the only thing he ever regretted doing was pulling that hawk's head off, because it had never done one thing to him. And I believe him. I did believe him.
Did the prison system become easier or more difficult as the years
It's
went by?
totally different. Let me tell you something. They treated the employee, the employee is all politics when I first hired in. They could fire you by saying you're fired. Your grandpa may have had a fist fight with somebody else's grandpa, some politician. They'd have found out what your name was 40 years ago, and all they had to do was say you're fired, and then you're fired. The door you came in out there, I have worked that door, and there's a mailbox there, ABC, whatever. Somebody would stick their head out of the deputy warden's office with an envelope in his hand, and he'd say, tell whoever, he's got a letter when he comes out, when he gets off shift. And you just go cold all over, because you know that letter would say, what it would say is, state no longer needs your services. You've just been fired by politicians. That stuff started changing some when people started coming back in Vietnam. They'd been shot at, whatever, and they just wouldn't take stuff off petty politicians that was connected to some politician. They didn't accept it anymore. And they'd heard cannon fire, they'd heard rifle fire, and they just didn't put up with it anymore and more. They formed a little union. The state didn't recognize it, but what it was mostly just saying, we're not going to let you do us the way you used to do it. And in 1972, an officer and a warden had a big argument out here. Each one of them claimed the other one cursed the other one. I knew them both real well, and I liked them both. And I'd say they cursed each other, because I knew the warden, he would start cussing quick. And I've always had a saying, once you start cussing, you've just quit discussing. And they cussed each other out, and the warden fired him, and everybody walked out. And they had a big blow up, and I know it hit all the newspapers, and the governor fired everybody, but they had a legislative committee was supposed to come up here, and what the officers up here told them, the one that actually was they said the problem, he said, I'll pay for a lie detector test for both of us. And the one that shows lying, if it shows I'm lying, I go down the road and ask everybody to go back to work. If it shows the warden's lying, let everybody go back to work. Just cut it off and everybody goes back to work. Well, the governor at the time said, my wardens don't lie. Look here, preachers lie, everybody lies. Not everybody, but everybody. Just because you got a title don't mean you can't lie anymore. And the place stayed closed for 4 years. And it had another governor's election, and one party said, if you elect us, we'll open the prison again. And he got elected, and they did. So it's been back open ever since. They let it run down a lot. The party that was in power let the place go to hell because they didn't want to see it red. They told everybody, this place, we're not putting up people like that. And this is a non-union state to begin with. But it got to the point you can only run people down so far, so bad. And I'm not sure how they deal with the union now, but they deal with people a lot better than they did at that time. They didn't deal with them at all.
What years were you working in the prison system?
I worked here. I went to work up here in May the 14th, 1964, and I left here in the summer of 1980. The warden was the first man over to regional, and I was the next one over there because I knew how to order stuff.
How did you see the prisoners change over the years? Were drugs more of a story
There's
later?
a lot of gang stuff now.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, a lot of gang stuff now.
Oh, gangs.
And they're dangerous. But when I come up here, you did not put a hand on the guard. You didn't put a hand on the staff. You just didn't do that. I would say that some people showed errors their ways, if you want, you can call it anything you want to. But also guards didn't go beating up on convicts either. You had to do something to have hands laid on you. But you did not hit a staff member. Now, they may stab a staff member, but it's gang stuff now, and it's totally different. I know at one time, when they first started having cameras, a lot of the officers didn't like the cameras. It wasn't a question they was going to beat somebody else. They just said it didn't look good. The only thing is the cameras protected you too, because it showed what you didn't do. And a lot of the time, you could get accused of anything up here, anything, by an inmate, and those lawyers will take any case in the world. They just will. And they'll sue you. I was in federal court one time for 3 days, and I'd been on this member of the disciplinary board, and the judge let the case go ahead that we hadn't let an inmate have a witness, and it was on paper. He turned the witness down. I was on the case, and we stayed 3 days in federal court before the jury found us not guilty, but it was on paperwork in front of everybody. And they caught one of the witnesses, one of this inmate's witnesses lying, the federal judge did, and he held a case up and told him, he said, the next lie you tell, or you utter, the next lie you utter, I personally am going to lock you up. Now, go ahead and testify. He said, Judge, can I be excused? He said, if you're going to lie, you need to be excused. He said, look, can I get the hell out of here? He said, if that's what I do, and he ran off the witness stand out of the courtroom. You don't argue with federal judges either, but they finally threw it out of court. And this inmate, what he did, he refused to go get the lunches. The lunches were in a bread box about 50 yards away for the whole gang. And it was his time to go pick them up and take them, put them on the bus. He's minimum security. And he told the officer in charge, you're going to have to get one of these kids. I don't do things like that. And the officer said, yeah, you do. You're just a member of my gang. Just go get the lunches and bring them on over here and set them down. And he told him to go to hell. And they wrote him up, and I was on the disciplinary board. And I don't even remember we didn't do much to him because there wasn't a whole lot to do to him to begin with. But his mother and daddy came to the federal court and I got called more names for that old couple, and they're 75 years old. And right before that, they had got caught bringing wood in. They could cook out on some grills, and they'd drill holes in the wood and put marijuana in the holes. And somebody snitched, and they'd locked him up for that too. And it was just a mess. But they undoubtedly were part of his biggest problem. He was had 5 rapes and 4 or 5 armed robberies, and they called him Little Teddy. That was their term for him, Little Teddy. And that's what they cussed us out for, having Little Teddy over there. And he's 38 years old. I remember a lot of things. I'm 85 years old, but there's not one thing wrong in my mind. I still remember a lot of names and places and things that happened. But they called him Little Teddy, and he was 38 years old, and he's bigger than I am. And but they'd also got caught. They didn't get caught bringing the whiskey, but some inmate told where they put it. And I was the one sent by the warden to take his car and count so many poles away from a gate down the road, and they'd be 3/5 whiskey sitting next to a fence post, and it was sitting there. I got out of the car, took it in the warden's office and handed it to him. I said, it was there. He said, I knew it'd be there, but that old couple is the one that he told me that brought it in. They do anything. They undoubtedly was his biggest problem, and that happens a lot.
Were there prisoners that tried to escape while you were guard?
We've had we've had prisoners go over the wall right here one time. We've had prisoners, minimum security ran off more than anything else, because a lot of the time they wouldn't be under a gun guard. But we've also had gun guard run off too. One sent off and got him a reverend license. He referred to himself as Reverend, whatever his name was. And he worked a half day one day and told everybody he'd mind running off after dinner. Well, he did, and he got shot. He got hit once in the back, one buckshot hit him in the back, and one creased him around the side of the head. And it was a real hot day. When they brought him back in, I thought he shot all over, but he only had 2 buckshot in him. But I'm trying to think, but he had him a reverend's license. You send off, get any kind of license you want somewhere. But the funniest part of it is he was close to where I live right, and I still live there. And he was within 300 or 400 yards of my house when he got shot, where he's working on the gang. And I called my wife and I told her, there's one loose. That's before they caught him. I said, there's one loose, he's been shot, he's dangerous. I said, get our son, get on the couch, get the rifle. And I showed her where the safety was. I said, if somebody tries to come in the door, tell them to leave. If they don't leave, shoot through the door. And I said, now, I want you to remember one thing, this guy's dangerous. Anybody's dangerous that's been shot, that's ran off. And if they've run off, they're dangerous. So anyway, then I couldn't get a hold of her. We caught him. They brought him back in up here, and he'd bloody as a hog, but he wasn't hurt very bad. So I called her, and she didn't answer the phone. Well, then I got scared and I went home, and I couldn't get her to come to the door. Now I'm scared to death because I'm afraid to get around the door, and I'm afraid she's going to shoot through the door. So anyway, I finally got over and got off to one side and started knocking. She finally hollered, come on in. And I got so tickled at her. She was sitting on the couch, and her and my son looked like 2 hoot owls sitting there, just humped up, and she's sitting there humped up over the rifle. I really believe she would have shot somebody that day, because I told her, I said, think of him more than you. If you don't worry about you, worry about him, because this guy's dangerous. If he'd have showed up, he very well may have got shot. But I've been around, I've had to go hunt convicts, and I've had to be, even when I was recreation, I was still used security a lot. And when it hit the fan a lot up here. It just did. Every day you didn't know what was going to happen up here, because we had the people that they'd tell you, I don't give a damn. I just don't give a damn. And they didn't. And I know I've told a lot of people that the part that wound up bothering me more than anything else, it got to the point it just didn't bother me a whole lot. And that's not nice. That's just not right.
Working in the recreation department of the prison, did you have prisoners that were memorable?
Look here, oh yes. We had Big John Tate. Big John Tate was a heavyweight champion of the world. Big John Tate came up here and worked out with our inmates. We had a boxing program up here, and Big John Tate and his manager, Ace Miller, they brought boxers up here, and Big John Tate made a regular appearance up here. He worked out with our people up here. Ace Miller brought a lot of people in up here. And we had Fellowship of Christian Athletes would bring people in up here. We had one group came in, and they were part of the Cleveland Browns football team. And they brought some people in. They brought a world-class weightlifter in. He did push-ups with me sitting on his shoulders. And we had another one that he put on demonstrations cutting watermelons off people's chests. He'd take a huge sword and he'd lay a watermelon on somebody's chest and draw that thing back like you see in the movies, these old movies where the samurais, he'd cut the watermelon, but he didn't touch anybody. And it's scary to watch him do it, because watermelon just fall over, and he'd really swing. We had a professional basketball player. He came in. He played for one of the pro teams. I can't remember who he was now. And then we had the world class the top heavyweight world-class weightlifter come in here, and he was huge. He was a huge individual, and they were religious people, what they were. And I like to see religious people like that come in here because the inmates got things to, they draw their attention. And Ken Sparks, coach at Carson Newman College over here, won some national football championships. He came up here some. He brought his, and over to regional, he brought his football team in every year over there and played a softball game with us and they put on demonstration. He was, if I had a son playing football, he was so religious, but he was so everything. He'd get your attention. He brought his high school football team up here, and the warden Lane asked me to give him a talk. And I told the whole crew that some of them had a problem with marijuana. A lot of high school kids have a problem with marijuana. They brought them up here and they wanted me to talk to them. And I told them, if you deal marijuana, you are coming to jail. It don't matter. You're only as smart as the dumbest one you're dealing with. And whoever gets caught that you sell it to, they're going to make them a deal. We'll turn you loose. You'll tell us who you bought it from.
Who was the prisoner you told me about outside that could pitch left-handed or right-handed?
Marlowe could flat bring it either way, and we had a lot of players come in here. We've had players that played pro ball come in here and take one look at him and they said, this guy can play. This guy can flat play. We had a shortstop here from Los Angeles, California, and he went to school with Junior Gilliam, who played for the Dodgers. I don't know if you remember Junior Gilliam, it was a while ago, but we had another guy here that knew them both. He said, Sylvester, our shortstop, was better than Gilliam in high school, but he had a 10-cent head. He'd make plays unreal that none of our other team players could make, but every once in a while they'd make an error and he'd flip his head. The next 2 or 3 balls, he'd pick it up and throw it plumb over the fence. And I'd just go throw him off the team. You can't do it because somebody killed him. See, up here, they bet on everything. You're not supposed to bet, but I'm not stupid enough to think that they're not going to bet. So Sylvester got out here and he made him 2 or 3 errors and we lost the game. Somebody may cut his head off because they got money bet on the blame thing. So then he'd go tell everybody, Mr. Tucker says, I can't play anymore. He could play better than anybody. He just had a 10-cent head. And we had the best shooter in basketball I've ever seen in my life till Steph Curry come along in 1966. He scored 60-something points a game. He'd come loping across the midcourt and put up a jump shot or 2 and miss them. And the other team would say, boy, look at this fool here. We're going to kill them. He may hit 10 or 15 in a row from out there. Nobody could. We had ex-college players come in here and just shake their head when they see him. I never seen him shoot a shot, didn't have a perfect backspin, but he didn't care who won. If we won, fine. If we didn't, he didn't care, because most convicts are not team players. They're I and me people. They just are, good or bad. But occasionally you get one or you get somebody in, and we had a kid out here, Mr. Gil Monroe, came down. He was a warden, assistant warden. Gil Monroe came down here from Dayton, Ohio on a basketball scholarship to UT. And he married a girl from Wartburg, and he wound up to prison out here. And we had this kid come in that played in Upper East Tennessee. His coach was one of the top coaches in the state of Tennessee, and I wound up getting to meet him. This inmate was in here for stealing car batteries, so he wasn't a hardened criminal to begin with. He's the best defensive player I've seen. He knew how to play defense. He jumped straight up. He didn't jump into anything. We took him to Carson Newman College with our basketball team. He scored 45 points against us. He was 6'4". He scored 45 points against a 6'8" post player that was MVP in the tournament they had. And Ken Sparks and the basketball coach was watching him, and they were going to offer him a scholarship to Carson Newman College. And Gil Monroe put the paperwork in for an educational release, took the trouble to do all that stuff. Gil went one-on-one with him. Gil said, this kid can flat play. He can just play. And he was a team player. He was a team player. This coach said he's one of the best team players he ever had. So anyway, They sent him over here to be released from the regional. Well, the paperwork came in. We thought it just didn't happen. But the paperwork come in one day, turn it in, it will be looked on favorably. The governor will look on it. So he's going to get out and he's going to get a scholarship. So I come over, brought the paperwork over here and told him, call your coach, tell the coach to call your lawyer, you're getting out of here. We're getting you an educational release. The next words he gave to me, you know where I can get a Pepsi Cola, do you? I said, Vic, I'm telling you how to get a college education. You're going to get a college education. And all you're concerned about, you want to get a Pepsi Cola. He said, well, I'm thirsty. I said, Victor, I don't know if we're going to be able to help you or not. But anyway, here's your paperwork, call your coach. They didn't do that. He signed with a business college over here and didn't go to that. He'd been in 2 more times. There's kids I know. I broadcast sports in this county and all around here for 35 years. I've seen kids would give their eye teeth to have the ability to do that. The kid that wants to play so bad, some just is not quite that good. This guy could flat play. He'd block shots on people 6 inches taller than him and just make them eat it. And we had a lot of college players come in and said, we've not seen anything like that. But we've had players here that could do anything. I got a call one day from Knoxville, and a guy said, I've got contact with a chess master. Now, chess masters are pretty heavy. That's people that can really play chess. And his forte was playing a whole lot of people at the same time, just moving around the room. And they want to know if we had some people up here that could play chess. Well, you'd be surprised how many people in the penitentiary can do things like that, any kind of thing. We had some people here could play chess. So we brought him up here and got in the dining room, and all of them brought their chessboards in. I bet there's 50 or 60 people in there, and 2 people beat him. They actually beat him. And he cussed me out. He called me everything in the world, said we was all cheaters and crooks up here, got to crying. And he told me he was never coming up here again. I said, boy, you're right about that. You are absolutely right about that. But you'd be surprised what people can do in the penitentiary. We've got people can do anything, just anything, any skill. And the 2 beat him. They were 4 of them in a little gang, a little bank robber gang, and they were going to college together, same college, and were doing well. But they got the idea how they could make a lot of money, and they did for a little while, and they got caught. But 2 of that crew beat him.
Ray, what would you say is the common denominator amongst all the prisoners you've seen in here?
Well, they wind up getting on some kind of drugs and they want the easy money. And they get it for a while. I know I used to get around bank robbers. I used to like to listen to them talk. I like to listen to people talk. And you learn a lot. You'd be surprised how much you learn too. You learn a lot of stuff. But they tell me, once you rob your first place and get some money, it is so easy. You just go in and stick a pistol in somebody's face and get maybe $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000, and you walk out the door, and it's so easy. And then when you want some more, you just go do it again. But sooner or later, you just maybe get unlucky. And selling drugs, you're only as smart as the dumbest one you're dealing with, because they're going to tell. People, snitches, people are going to tell. If two people know something, that's 1 too many. And you never want a charge partner. A charge partner is somebody gets you caught. It's just, and some of the smartest people in the country is your best crooks don't get caught. Your crooks, your worst crooks get caught. I don't care how much money they get. If I asked one up here, he'd been locked for 28 years altogether, in and out. And I asked him, if you figured out how much money, how long you'd been in the penitentiary, and how much money you'd average a year, if you totaled all you got up into one pile. And he said, maybe $2,000 or $3,000. And he said, but it's so easy. You just do it. You just do it. I never figured it'd be that easy. I was asked at one time, would you go to Brushy Mountain Prison and spend 1 year for $1 million? Just spend a year up there. I wouldn't. because you don't know if you're going to make it out or not. Because up here, you can get killed for looking at somebody crooked. We had one up here that killed 8 people. They figured out he'd killed 8 people, and he wound up escaping. He got a pistol. They moved him. They was moving him, and he got a .25 automatic and captured the 2 guards that was moving him, and he didn't kill them. We don't know why. And one of them was real good. Well, both of them a friend of mine, and he tied them to a tree. I don't know why he didn't kill them. He had nothing to lose. But he was a guy, if he walked by you and I, and one of us said something funny and another one laughed, and he looked over there, he said, they're laughing at me. He go get him a shank. He go trying to kill somebody. He walked in the dining room up here one time and stabbed a guy right down with the collarbone. Left the knife sticking in him, walked over and got his tray. Of course, he didn't get to hold his tray long. It's no big deal. Got his tray and got ready to eat. And we've had one walked in the dining room and had a large needle. I don't know where he got the needle, and stuck it right down in here. And they had trouble getting it out because he stuck it in there and it was a thin needle. Life's cheap up here. It was nothing. I'm gonna tell you real fun. We had an old man in here. He's in his late 60s, and he's one of the local towns around here. And where he was from, he was real well known, and he was dangerous, and he was connected to some rough people. 4 young black guys went in his cell over here and took everything he had that they wanted. And he told them, look here, this is not worth killing me. He showed him a knife. He said, they no point killing me. Go ahead and take what you want. I can get something else. Only thing is, when they walked out the door, he put a contract out on them. An hour later, they brought his stuff back and asked him, did they have anything at all that he wanted? Then they begged him not to have them killed. And he just smiled at them. And I got to know the old man. He's had a personality out of this world. He was just a career criminal. And everybody liked him. He just had a good personality. And I'd kid him every once in a while, have you canceled that contract yet? He'd say, they're not sure where I have or not. He wouldn't admit there was a contract. Only thing is, they went and checked in. Check-in's when you ask to be locked up for your own protection. Then when they checked in, then they asked to just ship us out of here because they're afraid somebody in lockup would go ahead and kill them. He wouldn't tell them where he'd canceled it or not. And he got even with them big time. And they asked to be shipped out of here. And it was easy to get a contract on somebody up here. Life was totally cheap. We had 2 huge guys up here stood toe-to-toe with knives, stabbing each other. And one of them bent the blade on the other one's head. And both of them stabbed, I don't know how many times. Neither one of them died. And they stood toe-to-toe stabbing each other.
Ray, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned after all your years here?
Mind your own business. Look here, the day I walked in up here, I'm going to tell you the story I tell everybody. The head of security up here showed me a box of knives. Now, I played ball in here when I was 16 years old, and I'd been in the military, and I'd a little more experience than some people. And he showed me a box of knives, had about 50 knives in it. Well, I wasn't impressed as much as he thought I probably should have been. So we walked out of here, and he's going to show me around first day. So we walked out of here, and there were 2 inmates standing here talking, and one of them said, who's the new buddy? A new buddy is a brand new employee or a brand new convict. And one of the other ones said, I believe he's played ball in here when he's a kid, and he was absolutely right. I was 25 years old, and I'd played ball in here when I was 16 years old. So we walked up the side of the building, and we walked to the corner, and he said, stop. And I stopped. I didn't know what was going on. And he stood there just a minute. He said, okay, let's go. So we walked up, and there's an inmate sitting on a wall up there, a block wall, and another inmate was walking off. And he said, walked over to the inmate, and he said, how's it going? Well, the inmate looked up, and I could see he'd just been hit in the eye. You can tell somebody's been hit in the eye, their eye watering, and the boy's blousing up already. And he said, everything's pretty good. He said, well, I was just checking on you. We walked on around the corner, and he said, now that guy had just got hit in the eye. He said, now if you see something like that, you got to lock him up. because that man's nose in everybody's business. That man hitting him in the eye may have saved his life, because you can't get your nose in everybody's business up here. It won't last long till somebody cuts your head off. But if you see what I saw, you got to go lock them up. However, if you stay here as long as I've been here, you may have experience enough to know when you let something go and when you can't. And I've remembered that all my life. But most of the time up here, you weren't supposed to do that, because it probably would lead to somebody's death. But he told me that the longer you stayed here, the more experience you had, and you knew who you could let it go and who you couldn't let it go. The thing is, you got to be real sure that you know who it is, because somebody will be killed. It's life. See, I keep telling you, life's cheap at Brushy Mountain. It meant nothing, because when you got 300 years, you're not going to do it anyway, and they're not going to execute you for killing another convict. Maybe what they call a baby raper. A baby raper is a child molester, whatever, and I have no respect for anything like that. One, I'm going to tell you, we had a man come up here right after I hired in, and his charge was molesting his son and daughter, and one of them was 12 and 13 or 11 and 12. Of course, he said he didn't do it, and they put him to work the mines. And every week, he'd have knots on his head or come home with his nose bleeding and whatever, where he'd been beat up. Child molesters were bad back then. And of course, he still said he didn't do it, but it was nothing unusual to see big bruises or cuts on him. And about a year later, it hit the paper. His wife had and her parents she'd found another man, and she wanted to get rid of him, and she made those kids testify against him. He hadn't done anything wrong. 3 days later, he's out of here. He's out. He went back home, but nobody will ever, and that's what I connect when people ask me what I do a year in Brushy Mountain Prison for $1 million. Nobody will ever know, have any idea what that man put up with up here, what he lived through.
And he was innocent?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, his wife. I know I told everybody to listen here, and some that didn't want to listen. If I was on a jury and he'd went home and blowed his wife away and her parents, he wouldn't spend 30 minutes in jail. Nobody will ever know what that man went through up here for a year. And he hadn't done anything wrong. Wow. Nothing wrong. Now, everybody, well, most convicts say, I'm not guilty. Sometimes they're not. But most of them are not only guilty of what they're charged with, but a bunch of other stuff aside. But I knew 5 at one time that got out. That got out. I can remember a kid right now come in, and he was telling me he wanted to know what kind of ball we played here. He's about 20-year-old, and I told him, he said, well, I'm going to play on your ball team. I said, well, if you're good enough, that's fine. I hope you can. He said, I won't be here long. I said, why not? He said, well, I'm not guilty. And he said, some people testified against me, and they're going to go to jail. So he said he worked at a religious camp, and he'd been charged with molesting some kids at a religious camp, but he said, I'm not the one that's guilty. The one that testified against me is the one that's guilty. He said, do you believe me? I said, son, I have 12 people judge you. I'm not getting into that. I don't know, but if you're not guilty, I hope to hell that you get out of here, because this ain't the place for anybody that's not guilty. Well, it rocked on for about 3 or 4 months, and he come to me one day and he said, Mr. Tucker, I know you like old cars. So I'm getting out of here. I said, my parents are on the way down here to pick me up right now. I said, I told you I wasn't guilty. Well, there's 6 of them indicted last week. I'm getting out. They're coming to get me. And said, I've got a really nice 40 Chevrolet coupe, and I want $5,000, and it's worth 10 or 15, but my lawyer, I got to have some money. And I know you love old cars, and I'd rather sell you this car. We're allowed to buy nothing. No convict can't buy anything from them. And he said, well, why don't you let one of your friends buy it and you buy it, ma'am? I said, no, I'm not. I got too much to lose. I'm not going to do anything like that. But what happened was his parents showed up down there and picked him up and took him home. And he wasn't guilty of anything. We had another one, and he's from the other end of the state, and two district attorneys almost went to jail over it because they hid evidence. He was a crook. He'd been in that stuff all his life, and somebody owed him some money. And he told them, if you don't pay me by in the morning, you're dead. Well, the guy's sister come to him and tried to get him to let me pay you what he owes you. He said, you don't owe me anything. Your brother owes me the money, and he better pay me. That night, they found the guy dead. Well, the man that he run around with, they went and arrested him and told him they was going to charge him with murder, and he not only confessed that they both did it, and they both went to jail. He got 20 years. They found a bunch of mess up in the case, and he got another trial, and he got 20 years again. They messed it up, and he got 20 years in the next trial. Now, this went on for how long? He's in the penitentiary. The guy walked in one day to the sheriff's office, said, I want to confess to something. Said, I killed that guy that you found in the ditch. They didn't want to hear that. And ain't nobody wants to admit they sent the wrong one to jail. And he told so many things that hadn't come out. And the man wasn't guilty. And they sent up there and turned him loose. He wasn't guilty. And his buddy had confessed to doing it because they got talking about the death penalty and scared him to death. And he confessed, and they cut him a deal for confessing. And neither one of them wasn't guilty, hadn't done anything.
Wow. How many years did he do?
Pardon?
How many years did he do?
He probably done 2 or 3 years. Wow. They had a mailman out of Greenville and a bunch of rapes and sent him to penitentiary. Of course, he swore he didn't do it too, but he had a vehicle identical to what they got. Well, 5 years later, a guy walked in and confessed he hadn't done it. Oh, they sure didn't want to hear that. No district attorney, none law enforcement wants to admit that they messed it up. Well, this guy about lost his mind. But the man that actually done the rapes, I wound up meeting him in the penitentiary, had one of the best personalities you have ever seen, and they ain't no way in the world you'd believe that he'd been guilty of something like that. But he walked in and confessed, told them what he was driving, same vehicle and everything. He was just guilty. He just confessed, and they had too much evidence exactly what he said. And they turned that other guy loose. But I know from a bunch of convicts knew him, they said he just never was right after that. But you figure, you go spend 5 years in a place like this, maybe even not like this, just locked up. And one that I'm going to write a story on is he was in Vietnam. He got captured and was a POW. But he wasn't listed as a POW. He was listed as missing in action. And he was married and had 2 kids. Well, he found out 2 or 3 years later that he was a POW. And when he come home, his wife, they declared him dead. And she'd remarried. And he real nice guy. And they talked, and he said he wasn't even upset at her. He said, I wouldn't have waited 5 years, thinking my wife's dead. I don't blame her for finding somebody else. So what they agreed on is his wife would do any discipline with the kids, and her new husband would not, because they wasn't his kids. Well, his daughter come to him. She's 14. This is his story, and I believe it. His daughter come to him, and her eyes were blacked, beat up pretty good, and said her stepdaddy beat her up. So he said, me and my wife already had an agreement. He wouldn't touch him anyway. So he went over and read the riot act to him, and his wife told him it wasn't none of his damn business, and he'd do any kind of discipline he wanted to. He said, not after a day, and he pulled a pistol and shot both of them. Killed one he didn't kill. And he done 10 years out here. He worked maintenance. I'd have hired him anywhere. I felt so sorry for him. And the day he left, he come in the gymnasium and said, Mr. Tucker, said, you've been nice to me. Said, I just felt good talking to you, and I want to thank you for listening to me, because all you do is listen. Sometimes you couldn't do a thing, but you at least listened to me. And said, I just want to tell you, I appreciate the way you've treated me. I said, well, I want to ask you one question before you leave, and you don't owe me an answer on anything, but I want to ask you a question. And he said, well, lay it on me. He said, I'll ask anything you want to know, I'll tell you. And I said, do you have any regrets when you pulled that pistol? He said, I got one regret, that I didn't kill the other one. He said, if you've seen my 14-year-old daughter and the way her face is beat up, and my wife looking at me telling me her husband could do anything he wanted to her, he said, the only regret I've got is I didn't shoot the other one some more. And I understand. See, the crazy thing is, I understand that too. But I'll bet you he's never come back to penitentiary. But can you imagine being in Vietnam, POW 4 or 5 years, and come in, and it's bad enough for one thing, it's your wife's gone, but then watch your daughter beat all to pieces. I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of things up here I wish I hadn't seen, but I wouldn't take anything for my experiences up here. And there's things that I know that when I go, I'm the last one knows them. And a lot of things that I was involved in, and escapes and things like that, where all of us are gone. Almost every one of us is gone that was involved in it. And I miss some of them, still miss them. You could depend on them. Yeah. You know, I watch people a lot. And when I was doing football games and basketball, girls and boys, it gave me a chance to say some good things about kids that were on the sports page rather than the front page. When they're on the front page, that's not good. It's just not good when kids are on the front page. But we had a guy right here, and the warden wound up putting him outside minimum. He was in for murder, but he in for 15, 16-year-old. But he played ball out here, and I had ball teams come in, and he was minimum security, and we'd play a doubleheader, and he would have the kids at the ball game out in the middle of the field playing ball between the games. Now, my son was 7 years old, and all the kids liked him. And he was a damn good role model, because he never done nothing bad around them. But the day he went home, his sister and her husband come to get him, and they come by my house to see my son. And he was at a swimming lesson. Well, me and him both come in. He wasn't with me, but we both came in right after they drove off. Well, I knew I could catch them, so I caught them down at Coalfield. I pulled up beside them, blew the horn, they pulled over. They still bother me. And my son jumped out of my car, running toward their car. He jumped out, running, and they was both crying. My son just by, and he was too. And he was saying, Mickey, them big boys don't cry, and them big boys don't cry, Mickey, them big boys don't cry. And he's just hugging on him. And I went and told my wife, I wish some people that seen some convicts would see something like that. And I don't know if he ever got married, how many kids he had, but he had more guts as far as playing ball. He could have played some college ball because he had enough guts. He just could play. And I wish people could have seen him and my son hugging each other.
Oh, wow.
A stone kind of, it still bothers me.
It's beautiful. All right, Ray, thank you very much.